Leading with Culture is brought to you by Maslow Leadership. Visit maslowleadership.com.
Angela Champ is the author of the book, The Squiggly Line Career, and she's also a CHRO. Named as one of Canada's top 20 HR leaders on the HRD Global 100 and on the most inclusive HR influencer list, Angela is a popular and a frequent conference and a keynote speaker. She's a frequent guest lecturer at colleges and universities, including Mount Royal University, University of the Fraser Valley, and St. Clair College. Angela is an advocate of advancing women in the workforce and was the founder of the ICBC Women's Network, which ran for 10 years. And she is currently the president of Lean in Vancouver Network. And here is our conversation with Angela Champ. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode. And we have Angela Champ, who is the author of the Squiggly Line Career book and also a CHRO. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on board. Well, we have a wonderful ongoing conversation with you, and we've partnered on many different occasions in the last couple of years. But tell me, what are you working on these days as a CHRO?
You know, with everything that's happened with the pandemic and post-pandemic, although we're not really post-pandemic, I and a lot of organizations like mine are dealing with a lot of the same issues, which is how do we make sure that our employees are staying safe? How do we, if necessary, bring people back to the office? If we're not bringing back to the office, how do we navigate a post-office hybrid world? What are the skills that are necessary for that? How do we want to treat people, recognize people? These are all of the topics that I'm hearing, not just in our own organization, but with my CHRO peers across Canada, the United States, and even into Europe. So working a lot on that and just all of the elements that go into making a workplace culture, like everything from compensation to recognition to what the office is going to look like and how the work is going to be designed. So that's taking up a lot of my time right now.
Well, there's no doubt that a lot of HR leaders are thinking about these questions. And this morning, actually, I was talking to another CHRO colleague, and the way we connected the dots was that, like, our previous understanding of culture with values and behaviors, it's wonderful. It is an end goal, a North Star. But these days, we're working about, back to Maslow's theory, the basic needs at work, the psychological needs at work, and acknowledging that if we don't meet some of those, the wonderful values on the wall, they just sit there. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, that is so true. And it's the psychological needs at work, and they're so different, not just organization to organization, but also whether you're geographically dispersed, whether people are working fully remotely or fully in the office, the needs that people have are so different. And one of the challenges that I'm noticing that some leaders have is where organizations or teams have allowed people to work fully remote now, is they have to remember it takes a lot more effort to remember to include people, to reach out to them, to have those water cooler conversations that are a lot easier to have when somebody's just sitting down the hall from you. And so I notice that people are working a lot harder. You have to work a lot harder, but you're not always getting the same result. And so you definitely, those needs differ from person to person and organization to organization.
Exactly. Well, looking at more of also a macro level and what's happening, the changing currents out there. And I like bringing the language of the from to. So what are we moving away from? What are we moving towards? What else are you noticing on the leadership realm, the executive realm? What's changing out there in the post-COVID era?
There's been a massive shift, Tim, and what I'm noticing is with the implications of COVID, both people looking around and saying, you know, life's too short. I'm going to finally buy that vineyard that I've always wanted to and become a vintner, or people saying, I want to change, going back to school and change professions. People saying, I want to retire. What I'm noticing at a macro level is that it's really become an employees market, a candidates market. And so organizations are really having to pay attention to what they offer to employees and candidates, not just from a compensation and benefits perspective, but really what kind of environment are they going to be offering? What sort of leadership skills are they going to be demonstrating? What kind of culture are they going to be insisting on? Because there's been a massive shift from organizations being able to do what they want because employees are dispensable. And there's another one waiting right behind that first one, to really being much more thoughtful about what organizations need to do because it has become an employer's market. Really seeing that shift in all parts of North America, especially.
Yes, you and I have been hopefully role modeling, but definitely preaching this idea of building great workplace cultures, people-focused cultures, and talking about the effects of if companies don't do that, how they're going to suffer. And interesting, I remember us having these conversations over the last 3-4 years and how it's become a reality now, right? It's not like a future consequence, it's a consequence now. And a lot of the prospects, clients we talk to, they're genuinely suffering from the turnaround, and not being able to find enough people.
Yes. And you're seeing that in the behaviors of the organizations, whether they're posting on social media, trying to be a much more inclusive environment, trying to be broader thinking in the diversity that they welcome to their organizations, not just gender diversity or ethnicity or sexual orientation, but also diversity in thought, perspective, and approach. I'm noticing that there's a lot more inclusiveness, or at least an attempt to be more inclusive and create that sense of belonging, because that does also speak to the psychological needs, the human needs at work. If people want to feel like they belong, they want to feel that the people, whether they're working in the office or across the country or in a fully remote, that their colleagues, their bosses, their leaders have their back and that they have theirs. I think I'm seeing a lot more as it's gaining importance with people.
Definitely. And your message resonates a lot with the idea of building healthy cells. People want to be able to build, like they want well-being, they want purpose, they want meaning, and they want belonging. And all of those align with, as you know very well, our message on self-actualization. It's almost like this post-COVID era. It's I wonder how 100 years later, when we look back, when humanity looks back, and what name will they give to this era? What type of a renaissance are we going through? And of course, it'll be easier to connect the dots backwards. But your message on the Squiggly Line Career also kind of empowers people to think about like finding who they are. And it's not always a linear path. And we also evolve as human beings, and our strengths evolve, our values evolve and change. But tell us a little bit about the Squiggly Line Career book.
Oh my goodness, how much time do we have? I love talking about the Squiggly Line Career. The book is really based on the premise that not everybody wants to or can follow a linear path in their career. You start off, let's use the HR profession as the example. You start off as the HR assistant, then you become the HR coordinator, then you become the HR generalist, then you become the HR business partner, then you become the HR manager, then the HR director, then the HR VP or the CHRO. And that's a fantastic career path as an example for people who want that. But there's lots of professions, including human resources, where people are able to gain skills and competencies from other jobs and be able to apply them to a new profession. And so the Squiggly Line Career is done in two parts. One is for careerists or job seekers who are looking for suggestions on how they can leverage a career where maybe it hasn't been linear, that they've switched professions or industries, as well as the second part for recruiters and hiring managers, and especially in this candidate labor market, where how do you expand your candidate pool by looking beyond just what's on the job titles on people's resumes and really looking towards those skills and competencies to fill that role. So I love talking about the Squiggly Line Career because really as employers, as organizations, we should be looking for people who can do the job regardless of what their job title is. And that means you can't be lazy. You can't just look at people's job titles or what their educational background is. You really need to look at what can they do and how can they apply it to the work that you need done, because that's what it's really about.
What are you suggesting that hiring managers should look into then that process then? What do they do differently?
Oh, well, so first of all, I would encourage hiring managers to look beyond what they've written in their job description. So if you go on to Indeed or LinkedIn or Workopolis, and you'll notice that a lot of job postings specify things like 10 years prior experience, a particular university degree, a particular software programming language. Really sit down and challenge yourself on why are you asking for those specific criteria. So why 10 years? Why not 3 years? Why a university degree? Can you learn that knowledge from other sources? And then instead of just listing the job description, so you're going to be filing paperwork, you're going to be filling out these forms, you're going to be answering customer inquiries, really think about the outcomes that you need at this role to do and list the job in terms of outcomes. Then when you're looking at people's applications, you can look to see what have they done that allows them to have that outcome, even if they've not done that particular job before. So, for example, if you're looking for somebody in a leadership role, for a leadership position, but maybe they haven't managed people before, but they've been the team captain for their school, or maybe for their sports team, or maybe they've headed up a major significant volunteer activity while in university. You need to look beyond just job titles in order to see that people have the competence to be able to do the job. And by thinking differently about how to approach your jobs based on outcomes and the candidates based on competencies, that really just expands the pool to the Squiggly Line career.
That's very interesting. That definitely resonates with me, considering my background of studying engineering, and I'm not a practicing engineer. And I started my career in sales and PNG, and I loved it back then, but I noticed I wasn't going to be a salesperson. I jumped into marketing, and I loved marketing, but I knew it wasn't that either. I jumped into HR, loved it, but it wasn't that either. But the common theme of all of these I found was obviously what I do now. It's leadership development and management consulting, and this work with culture leadership and coaching. But I had my Squiggly Line career to discover what I want to do in life.
I just want to say that you're a great example of a Squiggly Line careers, because you started off in engineering, and really what did that teach you? That taught you about numbers and research and accuracy. And even now with Maslow, it's a data-driven, research-based organization that focuses on what you're passionate about, which is leadership development. And so even though you think, well, how does an engineer become somebody focused on leadership development? But if you look at it, there is a link between what you learned in school and what you're doing now based on that competence that you might have learned in school. So you're a fantastic example of that.
Thank you. Well, we're also very proud to have you within the Maslow alumni as one of our Maslow certified executive coaches as well. So when you put on your coach lens and when you perhaps maybe coach others, so how does that relate to the realm of coaching, or how could coaches benefit from the Squiggly Line thinking?
Right. So as a coach, if you have a Squiggly Line career yourself, then you've got a broader perspective and a richness and experiences that you can share as you're guiding your client through that. And when you are a Squiggly Line careerist, or if you're looking to coach somebody who has a Squiggly Line career, you're able to coach and tease out of that client what are the competencies that work well to help them translate those skills to a new career or a new profession. What are the things that sing to them? Like you mentioned that you started off studying engineering, but really your common theme throughout your entire career was your desire to be in leadership development. And so as a coach, when you're thinking about the Squiggly Line career, you can help tease that out of your client to help them figure out what it is that makes their heart sing. What is their North Star? What do they want to do? And how do they apply the skills and knowledge from past professions to something entirely new? And so definitely applications, whether you're a coach with a Squiggly Line career or whether you're coaching a client who has or wants a Squiggly Line career.
Yes, and I see a lot of connections with the North Star practice that we teach and apply as well, in terms of helping individuals acknowledge their values, their strengths, their purpose. And sometimes that purpose finds grounds in one department, but in another time, another company might found grounds in a different department. So it's not necessarily department based, but it's values, strengths, competencies, purpose, vision based. So
it's true. An exercise I like to suggest to people, whether I'm coaching them with my HR hat on or whether as an actual executive coach, is to really map out every job that you've had. And for every job, list 2, 3, or 4 things that you most loved about doing that. And so as you go around and you map that out and you draw it as a diagram, you'll notice that there's a pattern that emerges. And so for me, for example, you talked about leadership development. For me, every single role I've had, whether I was an insurance adjuster, whether I was a bookseller, whether I was working for a rental company, an insurance company, it had the parts of the job that I loved the most had an element of mentoring, coaching, leadership development. Those were the common themes, regardless of what my job title was. And when I did that map, that exercise for myself, I had a huge aha moment, because then what it does is whatever job or role that I look for next, I now know that I want to look for something that will allow me to do that, because that's what gets me excited and gets me out of bed in the morning. And so that's another exercise that coaches or even people can do individually to help figure out what is that common theme that really makes you want to get out of bed in the morning, and what does that look like in the next profession you're going to have?
I remember well our conversation when we're talking about your values. And I know a lot of people talk about values, but when you've done the work, those values have a power, a strength. They stand on something. We talked about your values of influence and impact.
Yes.
On how if you don't live, you need to live those values no matter what, right?
That is so true. So true. Good memory.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Leading with Culture. I wanted to share what we do at Maslow Leadership in a minute. Many leaders are expected to manage culture, but are not equipped to lead with culture. At Maslow, we provide culture analytics, culture training, and coaching on how to lead with culture. In other words, we provide research and data-driven culture and leadership transformation. Our corporate programs include research in the design, where we measure the pre and post impact of our leadership and coaching programs. We have 3 pillars of our work. Number 1, culture transformation. Our research on the changing employee needs in the post-COVID era created a brand new approach called culture actualization. The employee engagement measures and systems we're currently using were designed 10 to 20 years before and are not capturing the needs of this post-COVID era. Leadership development. Leading with Culture and Leader as a Coach are our signature programs helping leaders on this next chapter. Number 3, coaching. We develop large-scale corporate coaching programs and offer ICF-accredited coach certifications. Reach out to us to get more information at maslowleadership.com.
Wonderful. Well, now let's move back to the organizational realm. Now, how could organizations benefit from thinking this way? How could we locate this as part of the culture transformation happening in the post-COVID era?
I think the organizations that are going to be the most successful in the next little while are going to be the ones that are becoming more open-minded. We mentioned earlier about being inclusive and creating a sense of belonging and really speaking to those human needs at work. And so in this candidates market and with what's happening worldwide, the organizations that are really focusing on those things and doing so by embracing the Squiggly Line Career. One thing that the Squiggly Line Career approach for recruiters, HR, and hiring managers, one advantage that it has is that it allows you to consider the diverse candidate who maybe didn't go to the school that you typically hire from, maybe has a different educational background, or maybe has no higher degree at all, who might have been overlooked. And by being open to different pipelines and sources, because you're looking at competencies and not necessarily on pedigree, it actually allows you to be more diverse and inclusive in your hiring practices and then at work. There are some organizations that are going to struggle with it. Some are not as progressive and will insist on it. And what they'll find is that either employees are going to leave those organizations, they're going to have trouble recruiting candidates for those organizations, or in those cases where there are employees who just can't leave it's not everybody can quit their job. It's just not realistic in every case. You may have a situation where you've got employees who are disengaged and disgruntled, and that affects the culture, and that ultimately affects the company's performance, whether that's profitability, market share, ability to expand, even for not-for-profits, their share of wallet, their ability to fundraise. And so I think that organizations that underestimate the importance of culture, the importance of the human needs at work, the inclusiveness, the belonging, and all of that entails are really going to struggle compared to other organizations that are more progressive in their thinking.
Oh, definitely. And it's already happening, right? So I'm going to do a few from-tos here and related to performance management and career management and for workplaces. I'm seeing this shift in performance management from more evaluative performance. So from like calibration, evaluation to coaching and reflection on past performance, learning, performance management as a form of learning. What did we learn from the last 3 months and what can we do different in the coming 3 months? And in terms of career management, what I'm noticing again in progressive or people-centered organizations is a movement from department-based career planning or single position title-based career planning towards coaching their people for possibilities. Like, let's groom you for being a better leader. And then that might open different paths because like there's a single VP position opening and there are so many people that want to get that and so many people get disappointed. So there's that shift happening. How does this relate to that and in terms of what companies should do for better career management in large organizations?
100%. There's definitely been a shift specifically around the performance management from that once a year evaluation where I'm going to sit here for an hour and I'm going to tell you mostly where you need to improve, maybe a few things that you did well. If I have a good relationship with you, I might be more honest. If I'm not as confrontational or I'm afraid of a confrontation, maybe I might gloss over it and just move on to, as you said, more coaching and learning. That takes a lot of energy and commitment by an organization. It doesn't necessarily come naturally for every leader and for every organization. And so those organizations that invest in creating that approach with their leaders, so teaching leaders how to be better coaches and having performance or career conversations, say quarterly, investing in role modeling that behavior and not just having a once a year expectation of a performance discussion. What I'm noticing a lot of larger organizations, Fortune 500, and I've seen and reading about this, is they're having monthly touch points or quarterly touch points where they're constantly not just talking about what people did wrong, but celebrating achievements and asking, how can I, as your leader, help you succeed? What do you need from me as your leader to help you succeed? And those are the kinds of changes in the from to the to that I'm seeing around career management. You've hit it on the head. When you're just talking about grooming somebody on a succession plan for a single position versus coaching for possibilities, it does open possibilities. And sometimes that possibility is you've groomed, you've helped develop that person to move off to a different company. And that's okay sometimes, because sometimes a person needs to leave in order to have that growth. I will say, not every employee and not every leader will be comfortable with that particular from and to, because some people want that specificity. They want to know that the job means I'm going to be an HR assistant and then an HR coordinator and then an HR generalist. They find comfort in that specificity. So as we move to coaching people to possibilities, we also need to coach them to be open-minded, that it's not going to limit them because they're not so linear in their path, but it actually expands their opportunity. We as leaders and organizations need to really be conscious of the fact that not everybody will be comfortable with that approach as we evolve to that approach.
I think it's really becoming harder to be a leader these days. And I know in the early days of COVID, the burnout stats were more on employee burnouts. But nowadays, this year, the burnout stats are way higher on the leaders and the managers side.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, think about it. Think about how, in manufacturing in the 1950s, what you needed to do to be a manager or a leader. You needed to get on that assembly line and needed to really sometimes yell at your employees to work faster, work better, to stop being lazy and pull up their bootstraps. And I'm not saying that every organization was like that, but think about a manager or a leader in the 1950s versus what, like you said, you need to be now. It is harder. You have to be a better role model. You have to know more, and you have to know that you don't know everything. You have to be vulnerable. You have to treat your employees as adults and equals, as opposed to minions. So I think you're right. Being a leader is harder. There's much more expected of leaders, and they're held to a higher standard than they might have been in the past.
And nowadays there's supply chain issues, client issues, hard to meet with clients, hard to find employees, motivating employees. And there are all the business results initiatives, but then there's HR, people and culture, DEI initiatives. And I'm hearing this a lot from leaders. It's really hard to be a leader these days. And they're also considering like their well-being and their careers as well. But
That's right.
I'm going to just, for the sake, this is not a question or anything we discussed before. If you were to envision another book on the squiggly line leadership.
Oh, Tim, I love it.
What would that look like? What would be your advice for leaders, their own squiggly line journey as a leader?
If you want to be oh my gosh, I'm just going to steal this idea. If you want to be a squiggly line leader, I would say, first of all, having a broad and rich experience outside of your specific technical expertise. So spending some time, if you're in operations, spending some time in marketing, spending some time in finance or in human resources, spending time or doing things outside of your industry in a different industry, and then maybe coming back. But really about learning how to apply your own skills and transfer that to leadership. But then how do you, as a leader, coach? How do you coach your employees to have that same squiggly line mindset where you're looking at the skills that are transferable among roles and not just that linear progression for every job within your department? I'm writing this down. Squiggly line leadership as my follow-up book. I like it.
Love the idea as well. And there's increasing evidence, and World Economic Forum really pulls these different articles and research well together on how soft skills is no longer the easy skills, and how like we see technical skills as hard skills, but actually leadership is a collection of soft skills. It's advanced level of soft skills and in the human skills, right? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, true. I don't like calling them soft skills because it makes it sound like there's somehow a lesser skill, trying to differentiate between the technical skills and the people skills. I like to call them strong skills. Mm-hmm. Strong skills, because if you are strong in that part, if you're strong around leadership, around empathy, around creating inclusion, around recognition, around developing the people around you, then you are, without a doubt, a strong leader. There's been research, and you may even know of it yourself, where you can have no technical experience in a particular role, but if you are a strong leader with all of that other stuff, you can develop the people skills, good recognition, your people feel a sense of belonging, they're inspired to do their best work. You are considered a better leader than if you're technically very, very good, but you lack all of the people skills. So maybe you're not approachable. People don't feel motivated to work for you. You don't recognize people. That's where you see a lot of attrition and people leaving those kinds of leaders. They're typically, people have strong technical skills, but not enough of the people skills, tend to be considered bad bosses. And what do they say? People leave bad bosses. So I like to call them strong skills, not soft skills.
I would then speculate that the squiggly line leaders then have those, what do you call them again? The
strong skills.
Strong skills.
Yeah, they're the people skills that really help to develop, inspire, and motivate the people around you on your team, in your department, in your organization. Because, think about, people come into work, and yes, it is an exchange of a salary for the work, but it's discretionary effort that makes the difference in an employee. And so if you want somebody to come in and do more than just the bare minimum, to give you that extra discretionary effort, they need more than just that paycheck. They need the leader or the organization, the culture that's giving them those strong people skills, recognition, belonging, and really focusing on the human needs at work that Maslow has so wonderfully articulated and put out there for the coaches to know and use.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Leading with Culture. Many leaders are expected to manage culture, but are not equipped to lead with culture. At Maslow, we provide culture analytics, culture training, and coaching on how to lead with culture. In other words, we provide research and data-driven culture and leadership transformation. Our corporate programs include research in the design, where we measure the pre and post impact of our leadership and coaching programs. We have 3 pillars of our work. Number 1, culture transformation. Our research on the changing employee needs in the post-COVID era created a brand new approach called culture actualization. The employee engagement measures and systems we're currently using were designed 10 to 20 years before and are not capturing the needs of this post-COVID era. Leadership development. Leading with Culture and Leader as a Coach are our signature programs helping leaders on this next chapter. Number 3, coaching. We develop large-scale corporate coaching programs and offer ICF-accredited coach certifications. Reach out to us to get more information at maslowleadership.com.
Now, as you know well, as part of our research, we found that some of the self-actualization needs at work is about leaders empowering people and leaders coaching and mentoring their employees. And you're mentioning that a lot. So you're a CHRO yourself. You're an author, consultant, speaker, and you've also taken the coach training program and coach certification. So how has that coaching touch, coaching spice affected the CHRO and maybe the speaker realm, or both?
Oh my goodness. First of all, for everybody who's listening to this program, this podcast, if you have not yet signed up for this program, the Maslow coaching program, you need to do this, both as an executive coach and as a culture coach. I cannot recommend it enough. And so here's where, as a CHRO or whatever executive level position you're in, when you're at the executive level, you are used to being a decision maker. You're used to being very directive. You're used to telling people or organizing things on what to do and how to do. When you go through the coaching program, particularly, Maslow's coaching program, it's less about telling people what to do or advising people about what to do, and really about guiding people on how to come to the right answers for themselves. That's where a lot of growth happens, because there's a different growth that happens when you're telling people what to do versus you're helping them explore and come to an answer themselves. So as a CHRO, what I found was my natural default was to give advice, was to tell people what to do, was to say, well, here's how I would do it. But if I really want to develop people and help them gain their own strengths, their own confidence to be the best that they can be, approaching it with a coaching mindset, particularly using Maslow's model, really helps develop those people, gets you out of that advising or directing mode and really into the human development mode, because you're really attracting people, or not attracting, but really helping people see what it is they need in order to develop and evolve as human beings.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Angela. That was an incredible testimonial. I really appreciate that. And I'm really glad to hear
Totally believe it.
what we've been able to add to your journey as well. Now, we talked a lot about culture, and leading with culture is the name of the podcast, right? I think maybe towards our last 5 minutes, we can start connecting the dots and narrowing the funnel towards this idea of leading with culture. And we've given a lot, hopefully, to our listeners, even in this episode on. But what would be just some of your advice on reiterating, how can leaders lead with culture?
Yes, first of all, I think that leaders need to be very specific about the kind of culture they want, and really examine about whether the behaviors that they role model and the behaviors that they tolerate support that culture that they say they want to have. A lot of organizations say that we're like family. Well, if you came from a family where you're all shouted at each other and you're very dysfunctional, that might mean one thing to one leader, but it might mean something else to another leader. So be really specific about what you mean when you say we're like a family, for example. Definitely starts with self-reflection and important conversations at the executive level, at the leadership level, to say, what kind of an organization do we want to have? What kind of a culture? And are we prepared to part ways with people and behavior that doesn't support that culture? Now, cultures are different. Every team has its own culture. Every organization has a culture. And most of them are not bad. They're just different. So, for example, I remember you gave me an example a long, long time ago of an organization where they really worked hard, and then on Friday night, they like to party hard. They all went out and had, drinks and, stayed out late. And if you're somebody who loves that, if you're single, or if you're just somebody who really enjoys socializing, for you, that would be a fantastic culture. But if you're more of an introvert, if you're somebody who lives 50 kilometers away and has to commute, an hour and a half each way, or maybe doesn't have a lot of discretionary income to spend, maybe that's a terrible culture for you. So really being specific about what kind of culture you want to create is going to indicate what kind of candidates and employees you're going to attract and retain. There are such a thing as bad cultures. So, if I want to go out on a Friday night and party with my department versus not, that's not necessarily a bad culture. But the bad cultures are where you accept and tolerate toxic behavior, bullying, harassment, discrimination, prejudice, criminal, unethical activity. That is definitely a bad culture. And I think if you're a leader that's looking at creating or reaffirming your culture, and there's evidence of this, really look in the mirror and say, why am I tolerating this? Why is it okay? Why is this the culture that I want to create? Is this the lasting legacy that I want to leave behind? Because in our short time on earth, whether it's 40 years or 60 years or 90 years or 100 years, we have a very finite time, but we definitely have an opportunity to leave this world better than when we found it. And so if you are tolerating toxic behaviors as your culture, really look in the mirror and ask yourself, why? Why is this the legacy that you're choosing to leave behind?
Angela, I don't know how to top up these words of wisdom, and I love it. That was such a high energy for closing, but reflecting on the culture we're in. Is that the culture I want to be in? Is that the culture I want to be part of? Am I part of the change, the solution, or not? So what's the meaning-making process? I think this was a lovely, and I have this saying you might have heard, a delicious conversation. So we had a delicious conversation. I thank you so much. And for those that want to read again, so Angela's most recent second book, The Squiggly Line Career, which I love as well. So check it out. And thank you so much, Angela, for joining today. And I look forward to our journey together of touching many lives and organizations on this path of leading with culture.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you again for being an inspiration to me. I'm now going to start on my next book, The Squiggly Line Leader.
I'm very glad to hear that. Look forward to talking about that.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.